Everybody. I am Nathan with Rewst. Going to give everybody just a couple minutes to finish getting in here. Um, cool. So yeah, my name's Nathan. I'm here with a couple cool people. I'm going to introduce them in a second, but first, I kind of wanted to do a couple of housekeeping things. One, the three of us here plus Gary and Daniel really want this to be interactive. So please utilize the Q&A and the chat. Please throw your questions in there, any comments, anything like that. We want to talk through those things. We'd love to interact that way. It helps webinar go and be a lot more fun. So let us know if you want to ask anything. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce everybody. I'm going to start with Jordan. Jordan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Jordan Hart. I'm the product manager over here at Hudu. Excited to be joining Roost with this integration. It's kind of been something we get asked quite a bit from customers, so it's really neat to see a pre-built integration. So yeah, excited to chat with you guys today.
Yeah, Jordan, it's been fun getting to know you as we're building the integration together and kind of going through all the API stuff. So thank you for joining me. And somebody that I see every week on Friday probably needs a little introduction here, but Brandon Martinez. You want to give a little background on yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone. Good morning slash afternoon slash evening, depending on where you are in the world right now. I'm Brandon. I'm the founding partner of Zentop Consulting. We are a process and automation consulting firm that helps MSPs adopt Roost and other platforms that focus on automation. Both at our MSP and through the consulting arm, we use automations that leverage Hudu pretty heavily. So we are excited to be on today.
Yeah, Brandon worked for one of our partner MSPs for a long time, and then he spun up Zentop Technology as a professional services organization that Roost uses a lot for customers who are, trying to get onboarded, but they need a little bit of help. So Brandon's team helps them out. And then two, the people in the background that are helping us be able to focus on the webinar by answering questions. I've got Gary and Daniel. Daniel is a account manager at Hudu, and Gary Pika Jr. Is the VP of marketing here at Roost. So let's dive in. I've got too many things popping up on my screen. There we go. We talked about this already. Cool. Who is Roost, right? If you guys don't know, Roost is a RPA. So we're a robotic process automation company. What that means is we provide a platform to MSPs and we allow them to build automations within that platform. We have about 60 different integrations that they can utilize to build those automations. And we have a big part of our business is enablement. That enablement is going to be through our Robotic Operations Center, or our ROC, and then our Cluck University. And today we'll explore how Hudu and Roost can help you automate your documentation management to achieve greater efficiency, consistency, and scalability. So processes, right? When we look at processes, and Brandon, I'm going to have you chime in here in just a second, but we look at what a process and what processes can be automated. And when we want to look at what automation processes we want to automate, we're going to look at how much time we can save. So when we look at a process that can save us, 1 minute, but we do that task 50 times in a day over a course of a year, that can save us 8 weeks. And so, Brandon, how do you kind of look at the processes that you automate within your MSP?
Yeah. So as Aaron says, you can't automate a process that doesn't exist. So step zero is figuring out what processes do we have in the first place? And if we want to automate something that isn't processized, how do we get it into the place of being a process? By a process, it means something a little bit different for everyone, but essentially some sort of document or something written down somewhere that you can follow is almost a blueprint where you can make sure it's done repeatably every single time and it's going to be done repeatably correctly and you're not repeating anything that may need some improvement on there. So look what you have already. We look for a lot of, we call them the quick wins, certain things that are things you don't necessarily think about happening in the background, but are very, very crucial to your business. One of the big ones for us is synchronization of things across different platforms, mainly contacts between 365 and our PSA. That's something that's a manual process. It only takes maybe 30 seconds to a minute to update a contact and make sure it's enabled or disabled depending on the status. But making sure it's done repeatedly every time, it really brings a lot of visible gains and efficiency to the organization, making sure that's always up to date. We're calling the right phone numbers. People who are terminated aren't actually in our systems. And that extends to documentation as well. Everyone loves good documentation. Not everyone loves updating that documentation to make sure it's good. So look for the quick things where, maybe every Monday you go through and you update this one specific document to make sure that all of your people or computer assets in your documentation platform is correct. How much time would you save, even if it takes only 5 to 10 seconds per asset to update across all of your customers and all of your assets, just once a week to have that happen?
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. And you kind of touched on it, but Rewst is an automation language. So what Rewst is, right? We're going to take kind of what Brandon talked about, those processes. We're going to look at all of those manual tasks that your MSP does today, and then we're going to automate those processes in Rewst to, again, increase your efficiency. Jordan, you want to hop into who is Hudu?
Yeah, absolutely. Switching gears a little bit, who is Hudu? Really, we're an independent leader in the IT documentation kind of space. So that really means that we integrate with a variety of different products, most of the leading PSA, RMM, and really other tools in the MSP space like Microsoft 365, OpenAI, etc., to help you operate, manage, and get more done. We are built by MSPs specifically for MSPs. We're rapidly innovating, and another benefit, we have that in-house support. So any of those questions that you have with the product, we can always help out anytime. Essentially, though, we are an integrated source of truth. So we bring all of that information into a single location so that your technicians always know where to find the information they need to service your customers and provide better customer service to those clients. If you want to go to that next slide, how do we really do it, or what do we do in general? We're that one-stop shop or that all-in-one platform for documentation. I won't read all of these, but the main things would be password management, process organization, like Brandon was saying. Getting those processes documented is kind of that first step. Hudu serves as the place to kind of store those for your technicians. We do asset management with a ton of customization and how you want to document that information. We have various new features like our IPAM and rack management, so you can keep that information all in that single location as well. And then you can have better management over all of the information stored within Hudu, whether that's documentation quality, revision histories, or audit logs of all of that information, tracking expirations and setting up alerts. So again, yeah, Hudu is that all-in-one tool for documentation.
Nathan, you are
Hey,
muted
Nathan,
at
I
the
think you're
moment.
muted.
Love it. Thank you. Brandon, wanted to ask you a question. So when you were at your MSP, how much did you love manually documenting everything?
Love is a interesting word. It was a two-parter where it was like, I don't want to spend the time to sit down and do this mind-numbing data entry. So I'm frustrated with that. And then I get frustrated when the data wasn't there because I was too lazy to sit down and do the mind-numbing data entry part of it. And it would just be a round back and forth of this isn't here, but I want to put it in. But if I don't put it in, it's not going to be here. I'm going to be mad because I didn't put it in. So the more we can take off of that manual process, the better.
And I think it's a huge drain on resources too, right? Like
Yep.
Hudu, these documentation platforms, it's a necessity for these MSPs. It's the only spot that you can have all of these information documented about your customers and in a secure way. And then when you look at how much time it does take the MSP to go through and document each individual piece, there's a big burden on the staff to do those things, but it is necessary because we need that. So kind of diving in, we want to kind of transform that approach, and we want to use automation to start taking that burden off of the staff and enabling the staff to be able to see that documentation automatically built. So that's why the Rewst Hudu integration is so big. What we're doing is Rewst and Hudu together. We partner together. Rewst has 60 different integrations that we can grab data from, and then we can put that data into Hudu. So it really does give the MSP technicians one pane of glass that they can go look at a customer, see, what AV they're using, see the users that have 365 access, what groups those users have access to, what licenses those users are accessing, right? All that information is going to be in one spot. Jordan, does that sound like it'd be helpful for your customers?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things we get quite a lot is how do you get your team to start documenting? One of the biggest challenges. So, being able to kind of automate a lot of those processes would definitely help a lot of customers.
Cool. So again, we're automating the documentation because we're trying to save time. But another big thing there is we want to remove the error. So Brandon, kind of, jumping on your MSP days again, when you were at an MSP, you're doing, all your tickets every day. Did you ever make mistakes and forget stuff?
Oh, yeah. I mean, everyone wants to say they're completely infallible, but I mean, mistakes happen. You're doing the same process over and over again. And I know for a lot of MSPs, they are masters of wearing many hats or all of the hats, depending on the size of the organization. So one of the really key benefits of automation, especially of documentation, is the reduction of that errors. You're not going to forget to do something. You're not going to type in an extra digit on your keyboard and not realize it when you're saving something. And 2 weeks down the road, when you reference it, you have bad information.
Yeah, and so then when we look at the efficiency there, you guys probably have checklists, right? So as you're going through your onboarding, you have a checklist that you're supposed to do all these tasks every time. But if you're onboarding a new customer, you're trying to close all that stuff out really quickly because you're trying to do the best thing for the customer. And as you're doing that, right, your speed is probably your top priority at that time. And sometimes you do make those mistakes. That's where automation kind of keys in here, and especially in this documentation piece, when you're automating the documentation, you're then automatically all the time going to have that document updated as often as you want to run that workflow. And so those pieces of being able to automate the 365 environment, the users, all of that stuff, as the users added or removed, that document is always going to be updated. And it's just going to be a more enjoyable work experience because it's removing a lot of that headache from the mundane work of the MSP technician. So kind of getting into these use cases, this is going to be, I'm going to, again, piggyback on Jordan and Brandon a lot here, but the first one there, documenting 365 environments. Jordan, can you talk about kind of how Hudu is doing this today?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the documentation of this information would either be just a manual entry, like Brandon was talking about, where information could get skipped over if a technician doesn't feel like entering it in that day. We do also have it a 365 integration, but that would need to be set up on a per client basis, and it really brings in a decent amount of information, but probably not everything that you need. It would be those that user information, license information, and mailbox information. But again, setting it up on a individual client basis, so you do have to. There's quite a bit of overhead in that integration setup.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and then Brandon, kind of, I know you were unpacking some of these crates over the last couple of weeks from the last time we talked. When you're kind of looking at the documenting 365 crate that Rewst and Hudu released, what benefit are you seeing that crate provide the MSP that you used to work for?
Yeah. So the big benefit has been brought up already, the term source of truth. You're going to have a lot of sources of truth as an MSP, and you want to designate one as the primary source of truth. And we want that to be our documentation platform for our team. We don't want someone to have to say, okay, you need to go into this portal in Microsoft to get this information, and then this is going to be in the PSA, and then you have to log in as this specific admin user to get this information because you can't get it out of GDAP because Microsoft reasons. So being able to consistently have that information pulled in, not only for existing customers, but knowing every time we add a new customer, it's going to start running that same automation for them, really gives a huge benefit. Not to jump ahead if we're going to go into the crates in detail, but some of the big things the 365 documentation crate does is not just user tracking, but tracking guest accounts, checking your licenses, seeing how many do you have allocated, how many do you have free. If you have privileged groups, who's assigned to those groups, what kind of domains are being tracked in the tenant. So it goes beyond some of the common things you think off the top of your head of like, okay, well, I know who's in the tenant, but I can look at that anywhere. But are you getting a whole picture of the entire Microsoft tenant? And is there one place you can pull that out of?
Yeah, and then too, another thing that I saw when I was reviewing the crates is they were being built by at Reed. He's our robotic operations center tech who built these crates was documenting out the last time the user's password was changed and if MFAs turned on, right? So those are big features that just that single pane of glass that a technician can look at and they can see, oh, this password hasn't been changed or MFA is not turned on, right? That kind of gives you more visibility and tasks to be able to better protect that organization, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. So now we kind of dive into how to find what to automate, right? Now that you've got these 4 Rewst crates that have been built and released with Hudu, what else can you do? Some of the big things that we talk to our customers are about is look at your tickets. And so for Hudu specifically, right, the Rewst Hudu Better Together story, we want to look at what else can you document? What are your technicians documenting daily, weekly, monthly that can be updated to an automated process in Rewst to be able to allow that technician to have more free time and that documentation to be consistently done. You should be able to find that information, in your tickets, talking to your techs. Also, at Rewst, if you want to talk to your customer success manager, they'd be able to help. And also, probably your contacts at Hudu, they'd be able to give you some good ideas about what other tasks you would want to look at automating to, continue building out your documentation in your Hudu platform to be able to provide that single pane of glass for your technicians to see, but also not relying on your technicians to continue building out more and more documentation. All right, from here, I think, Brandon, you had a couple things you wanted to talk through, right?
Yeah, I can share some of the workflows that we've made here. There is one specific one I wanted to show off in the call, and then figure we can kind of bounce back and forth on some ways we can maybe even add to it. If there's any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and we can go back to that as well.
Sounds great. Do you want to share your screen out? I'll
Yeah.
stop.
All right. Is everyone able to see this beautiful workflow here?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So with Microsoft, you have GDAP, and GDAP is kind of a bad word to a lot of people. It is definitely a change from the legacy DAP methods. Overall, it's an improvement. I do appreciate the more granularization of it, but there's been a lot of questions around what do all the roles do? Why do I need them? When do I need to renew all this? And one of the great things that is a feature of Hudu is the expirations and the customized alerting around what happens when you reach an expiration for a specific item. So we want to document first off what each of our GDAP agreements contain, what they're called, when do they expire, are they active, are they inactive? So we have somewhere to reference where if we start getting permission issues in an application or a technician can't get access to something, we can go, okay, it's probably going to be related to this. But outside of that, we want to make sure that we are renewing these in a timely manner, being proactive about it. Microsoft has a 6-month auto renewal on their GDAP agreements, but ideally, if we need to update permissions and do that renewal manually, we know it's going to be coming up and it's not oh, oops, it auto renewed. Now we have 6 months to get this going. So this is a workflow that's going to help actually insert the documents into Hudu that tell us exactly when these are going to be expiring and what they contain, and then notify us out of the Hudu alerting when something happens. So when we build our workflows here, if this is the very first time you've seen the Rewst editor, they are drag and drop actions here. You have a list of actions on the left-hand side here. A lot of these ones for Hudu are pre-made, and then you do have the option to send a generic request if you want to do something fancy or custom that's not in here, but generally everything we're going to do is already included in this list of actions. We're going to start with a defined beginning, and then we're going to build a list of our tenants. This is going to use the Microsoft Graph integration to list all the organizations in Rewst and then get their 1090s. So we're just saying, hey, who do we have in Rewst as a managed company? And then we want to get their 1090s out of Microsoft. Once we have that, we're going to circle back and we're going to flow into this sub workflow. All of these purple workflows I'm clicking on are sub workflows. These are downstream workflows that are able to be reused multiple times across multiple automations. The reason why we want to use sub workflows is, first off, you'll notice this little loop icon here. We can iterate through all of those 1090s in this specific case. So it makes the workflow itself something that you can repeat over and over and over again without having a list of repeating tasks and then having to contain the information somewhere in like a variable and reference back to it. It gets a little bit messy outside of that. But also the repeatability of it. If we want to build a list of our tenants for anything else in the platform, we can reference this anywhere else. If we need to make an update, say Microsoft's APIs change, we don't have to go into every single workflow that is utilizing this. We just update the sub workflow and that bubbles up to the top. So the meat of it's going to be in this Git agreements here. And this is going to just loop for every single tenant and Rewst ID that we have. We're going to start off by going into our graph and we're going to say, okay, out of the tenant relationships, do we have any customers that are under delegated admin? Out of that list, we're going to say, okay, so we found this customer in that list. So we're just validating the information we have from the step prior is correct. This is our tenant. We have an agreement we can pull it from. So we're going to actually get the list here. So we're going to get tenant relationship, delegated admin relationships, and then we're going to filter that list out. Out of that agreement, we're going to do a little bit of filtering with some Jinja. It is the templating language that Rewst uses. I won't go too deep into this, but basically we're saying we're going to iterate through all the customers that came back out of that relationship check and then make sure that the customer's tenant ID is equal to the tenant ID we're feeding into it, just so we can verify here are all of the agreements. So if there's multiple ones, we're getting a list of them. Once we have the list of our agreement IDs, we're going to get a reference here. This is straight off of Kelvin Teglar's SIP project. He has a nice file in his SIP project called GDAP roles. This JSON file contains all of the role IDs, the names, and the descriptions, and he keeps it relatively up to date. I call this R&D RAMA duplication. I feel a little bit less bad because I contribute code to SIP, so this is me pulling it back out. But this is somewhere we can reference and say, okay, so using this information, what do we actually do with all of this big JSON object out? So we're going to go through and we're going to match everything. So this roles reference here is just going to be the output of this, parsing it as a JSON object. And then we're going to do a lot of things here. I'll kind of go through a little bit fast on this. Feel free to connect with me after and I can go a little bit more in depth here, but for the sake of time, basically we're building a few custom objects here. So we have the role, the name, and the description. This is going to set a template for the role definition out of the roles ref up here. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and just iterate through them and say we're going to append the agreement name, start, status, and then the roles out of that list. So at the end of it, we have a nice pretty JSON object that has the name, the start, the end, the status, and the roles. And the last step is add the asset to Hudu. Here's where we come full circle and come back to the documentation part of it. This is another sub workflow that we can reuse for basically anything we need to add. This one is pre-filled for the GDAP agreements, but we can easily copy it and change it. But first off, we want to check, does this exist already? I don't want to, whenever I run this, add just an infinite amount of duplicate assets here. So I'm going to look in the GDAP agreement asset layout for the company for name, which is going to be the name of the agreement. If it's already in there, I'm going to take this path that says exists. Skip, we're done. We don't need to do anything here. But if it's not in there and it's not a failure that we got back, we can go ahead and say, okay, well, now we need to actually add this to Hudu. So we're going to go ahead and select the asset layout GDAP. We're going to fill in the name, and then we're going to fill in the items here. So layout field with the ID 919 correlates to the status of it. And then we have some formatting on here to make the date and time pretty instead of how Microsoft spits it back at us for the start and the end. And then we have the roles. And what I'm doing here is building a HTML table using the rich text field in Hudu to make a nice bolded list of all the roles. So for role that comes back in the roles assigned to the agreement, we're going to set the name there as a list item. And then within that list item, we're going to add 2 more bullet points for the description and the ID of that role. And then we're done. Along the way, we have some error checks. This is just going to notify us when something fails. So if we have any specific customer information we can put in, we can pop it in there, but essentially make a ticket on our board so we're not just failing this silently and not ending up with any agreements. So a lot of talking to end up with this. This is our Contoso tenant. Within here, it's a GDAP agreement for a CDX dev we have, and that is what it spits out as. We can see the status is active, when it was creative, when it expires within a few months, and then each of the roles. This is the big JSON object we were building where we have the name of the role, the description of the role, and the ID of the role. So say someone needs to change a conditional access policy on this tenant and they can't do it. They're getting an error message, everything's grayed out. Microsoft with conditional access, it doesn't actually tell you you're missing the roles. It'll just not allow you to click anything into it. So we can go, okay, I could go to the partner center and wait 3 to 5 minutes for the partner center to load, go grab a cup of coffee, come back, wait a little bit longer for it to finish loading, click on the tenant that we need to inspect, go to their agreement, pick out their main agreement, and then look at the roles, and then just get the names of them because you can't actually see the description of it. Or we go, hey, we have our source of truth. We have Hudu. We can go into Hudu and go to the GDAP agreement asset for this company and take a look at what is in here. You'll notice that there isn't anything for conditional access. Probably means we need to make a new agreement that has that on there to expand the least privileged scope of roles because now we need to do that. So very last thing I want to show off on here, I talked a little bit about the expirations. So how do we actually find out when something is broken? In Hudu admin, you have alerts. And you can call it whatever you want. You can do a number of different alerts on here. We're interested in expiration. You can select the expiration type. So we'll do asset expirations to target the GDAP asset. You can do X days before expiring. So we'll say 2 weeks before it expires. And then where do we want to send it? You could send it to an email or you could send it to a webhook. And the cool thing about webhooks is that can be sent right back to Rewst. So with an email, you can get an email to your support mailbox and do something with it. Or you can say, hey, Rewst, I'm going to post you back this information. And then Rewst can take that and make a ticket in the PSA on the correct board with the correct type, subtype, and item for Microsoft Relationship Management expiring GDAP. Use that to then trigger the Rewst workflow for the dispatch helper, where it looks at the type, subtype, and item and looks at the specific skills you have set for your members, and you find the one who has skills and certificates in Microsoft management, and then you can suggest your dispatcher, oh, hey, it looks like we should assign it to this technician because they're the most versed in this specific thing. Go ahead and put them as the assigned contact. So it really ties everything together with this webhook alerting to allow you to go from Rewst to Hudu, back to Rewst, back to your PSA, and really make it custom based on your specific processes.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon, for showing those things off.
Yeah, for sure.
John, any thoughts? Jordan, sorry, I said John. Jordan, my fault.
Oh, no, honestly, it's pretty neat to kind of see the power of what Brandon has been able to do. And really like the kind of repeatable processes that you can go ahead and do with those, I forget what you call them, sub tasks, essentially, or sub workflows. Makes a lot of sense.
Yep, the sub workflows are so nice because especially with the adding of assets, generally the only thing that's going to change is what type of asset I'm putting into it. If the asset's going to have a text going to fill in, I can just make a sub workflow, and then I can pre-fill the error handler into it, so I don't have to worry about going back and adding the error handler and filling that out all the time. Or say I change the way this asset layout works and the ID is different. I don't have to go into every single workflow at the top level that is used that specific Hudu action to update it. I just change the ID in the sub workflow and then good to go.
Yeah, that's awesome, Brandon. One of the questions that was kind of thrown out, I responded to it in the chat, but I just wanted to kind of bring it up to the group. What's the real value that Hudu brings to the Rewst relationship against the documentation crates in Rewst, such as IT glue? My response was, Hudu has built a product with an open API, and that allows the Rewst partners to be able to use that documentation tool without any API restrictions or rate limiting. That's my answer. Jordan, what do you view the partnership as?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point is the availability to the API and the lack of restrictions there really allows you and Brandon obviously to do a ton of things with the integration there. I think some other kind of benefits that could be pointed out is just the customization of where you can store that information. So pulling that information in, utilizing Rewst within Hudu, you have the option to really store that uh, anywhere within your Hudu environment. We don't have the concept of kind of core areas. Everything is customizable, so you can get all of that information, store it on a card with, that's potentially say a contact card where it has manual information, as well as other information coming from 365, your PSA and RMM, and really have everything on a single screen to get that single pane of glass.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jordan. Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, from the MSP hat, I don't have a hat, I have sunglasses. I'm gonna put my MSP sunglasses on for this. So as an MSP and not a service provider for this question here, one of the things we really enjoy is just working with the Hudu team and the way they built their product. They mentioned at the very start that they are built by MSP for MSP, and it's easy to see that when we're using the product. We enjoy the fact it's self-hosted. We don't have to worry about if there is a provider downtime incident. And it also means that if something's broken, it's probably my fault, and I have no one to complain about besides to myself. But yeah, I mean, the updates are regular. It's great to see the changes coming in, and of course, just having an open API that I can poke with. And if I need to look at the calls to make sure things are going good, I have access to the server that's hosting it directly, and I can take a look. There was a problem with how we configured our Cloudflare tunnel that our Hudu is posted behind that was preventing some API calls from working properly. So instead of having to make a support ticket with the vendor and wait for them to go back and forth and interface it with Rewst, I was just like, I'm just going to SSH into the server hosting this and watch the request come in. Oh, it's proxying it out of a different IP address than the one I whitelisted. Let me just change how this tunnel works, and then we're good to go. Real quick as well, I saw it in the chat come through. I'm taking my MSP sunglasses off. I'm the consultant Brandon again now. Someone mentioned that they do a lot of work with the Hudu API using Python and requests, and it would save a lot of time for the automation team. We talk a lot about time savings for the MSP on the ownership and technician side, but it really does help a lot of the automation. The more sub workflows you build out, the easier the process is to be repeated, and the more you can extend that building to people down the line. If you have a set of core automation engineers who are really well versed in working with API and creating these calls, they can make the sub workflows that handle how to actually say add the information into the asset when they need to pop up in the dev console and see what the IDs of the fields are. But once they make that, you can give that to anyone else on your team who is maybe defining the process. And they don't need to know how to craft the API call. They just need to know to search for the sub workflow that says add GDAP agreement asset to Hudu. And then they have some nice, pretty input fields for what they want to put into it. So it really helps your team extend, not only build faster, but extend who on your team has access to build in the platform.
That's great. Yeah, we got a couple more questions. So, are there plans to expand the existing Hudu crates or add more? So at Rewst, I don't know if you are a Rewst partner yet, but we have a weekly call on Fridays where our entire customer base gets together and we use a canny board to determine what crates our marketplace team builds. So if there is more need and desire, throw them on canny. We'll take a look at the board and look at building more as we need to. Also, our community, like Brandon, has built a ton with Hudu today. So there's a lot of stuff, to Brandon's point, that you can rob and duplicate in your environment just based on what other people have already built.
Yeah, in the Rewst Discord, there is a workflow forum that people post export to their workflows in. A number of people, myself included, have a GitHub repository where they're posting exports. When you export a workflow in Rewst, it's just a JSON file that defines how it works. So people are very, very keen on sharing what they've made with the wider community as a whole and helping each other out. There's a channel in the Rewst Discord as well for just Hudu. And everything in that channel is specifically around people, whether it be the Rewst support team and on their rock team or people in the community, helping each other when they have questions. How do I access this asset? I'm getting this error. What does this mean? Even if, before the support team even gets to it, someone might answer, oh, I saw this last week. It was this. You should change that. And then it's good to go and fixed.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. Are these integrations adding information to assets in Hudu as cards or updating asset layout fields or both? So I'm going to throw this to Jordan first, and then Brandon, I'll have you finish it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe they're coming in and updating the manual card and the manual fields, although I assume there's the possibility of creating those fields as well via the Rewst integration so that everything can happen through kind of the Rewst side of things. So you don't need that manual overhead of create them in Hudu first, then populate them from the Rewst side. I would assume they're coming in, they're being able to create the assets because that's available via the API create the asset layout fields via the API and then actually populate them via the API as well, or the Rewst integration.
Yeah, so Jordan, we have all those actions in the Hudu integration today. So we added 55 different actions to the Hudu integration. So pretty much everything in the Hudu API is available within the Rewst integration. Brandon, any thoughts on kind of how you organize things in Hudu?
Yeah, exactly. So you do have the option to create and update both asset layouts as a template and the assets themselves. So when I'm updating the GDAP agreements and the workflow I showed off, I'm just directly saying, go ahead and make a new asset within this asset layout and then insert the information just directly into the asset fields as if someone was typing it in when they're making a new asset. So you are totally able to check. So if you were like unpacking a crate, for example, check first, does this asset layout exist in the first place? If not, then go ahead and make it. Now that it's there, we can start making assets of this asset layout type and go through. On top of the asset layouts, there is also predefined actions to create, update, and delete Magic Dash items as well within Hudu, which is a super cool feature that I'll hand back over to the Hudu folks to talk more on that.
I'm sorry, was that a question towards me? I was reading that next one coming
Oh,
in the
yeah,
chat.
I just brought up the concept of magic dashes, those items within the platform.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, for anybody who's not aware of kind of the idea behind the Magic Dash, it's really a completely customizable dashboard that you can configure on each of your clients or company's homepage. And the power behind that would be actually, yeah, again, utilizing the API. So there's endless amounts of things that you can go ahead and do. Uh, Throwing it back at our community again, they similar to the Rewst Discord, we have our own community where people share scripts and the amazing things that they've done with that Magic Dashboard. I mean, embedding diagrams, embedding client reports, tons of different things. So being able to kind of integrate the power of the dashboard into Rewst is kind of a game changer as well. Brings everything to that front page of the clients.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Yeah, and then the next question, documenting Docker environments in Hudu. Just my response first, if you can pull the information from Docker with an API call, grab the information, format it, and then you can put it in Hudu however you want. I think that functionality is there today in the integration. Brandon, what do you think?
That sounds fun. Yeah, so the cool thing about Rewst is it's really vendor agnostic. As long as it has an API, you can reach into it. It can act as the conductor for the orchestra. It can make one platform talk to another, and one of those platforms could be your RMM agent that has access into your Docker host. You can create a PowerShell script that is sent commanded via Rewst to send out via your RMM agent to the Docker host and say, hey, give me a list of all of the Docker containers and their health and where their containers are stored. Go ahead and post it back to this webhook that's waiting for a response. Rewst gets that webhook response. It has everything it needs and it adds it to the asset in Hudu. Something changes, you run it either on event or on a schedule. Personally, I like to do more event-based workflows so we don't just have a flood of cron schedule workflows happening all at once. So you can do some checks with your RMM agent and only post it to the webhook if something changes. But yeah, you can definitely use that to keep it up to date. It doesn't have to be Docker. Any sort of containerized application, as long as you have access to either directly ask the container host via an API or via something like an RMM to send a command to it on the actual host server itself, it can take that back.
Cool. And we are getting blown up with questions now. So this is great. Thanks, everybody.
Saw a big one come through just now.
Yep. So I'm scrolling up, trying to find the next one. Docker.
And the next one's asking where
Jordan,
the
for
Hudu
you,
community is.
yeah, Hudu community. Is there something that some of these people can get plugged into?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just typing out that response. The main customer facing one, where we're going to release kind of announcements and things, is going to be our subreddit. So our Hudu. We share almost everything that we collect from the marketing side of things, from the scripting side of things to customer questions. All kind of lives in that subreddit. On the more technical side of things, so really where people kind of discuss scripts and things, it's going to be our channel in the MSP Geek Discord. I use it on Slack, but I believe it has switched over to Discord. And that is just vHoodoo. That's where a ton of links to different API resources, to the Magic Dash resources, to just people communicating on those different scripts that they're working on is. So I kind of usually reference that as more of our technical and our API community, whereas the Reddit's going to be more of our customer-facing general questions community.
Okay, so you kind of answered that next one of documentation on Magic Dash. That's probably going to be in the Discord channel, right?
Correct. Yeah. So if you're looking for kind of a good repository, actually, Luke, very popular in the Luke White Space, forgetting his last name, but he's actually created a website, mspp.io. Daniel just linked that in the chat. That'll have a great reference for Magic Dash scripts. There's also been tons more placed in that MSP Geek. We are hoping to actually create a kind of single source for that, either putting it into the Reddit or a separate thing altogether very soon, though.
All right, now to the long PowerShell script one. We have a lot of legacy PowerShell scripts that we're running on a schedule via ConnectWise Automate to do things like rotate 365 domain admin passwords, handle per user MFA enablement, etc. Then write that data to new domain admin passwords back to Hudu. One of the biggest struggles we've had with that approach is the API rate limiting with Hudu. But from what I've heard, we can rebuild these scripts as workflows using existing 365 and Hudu functions, and it won't be subject to those rate limits. If so, what would the dev team? So, sorry, my thing keeps on popping down. If so, that would be well worth the dev time. Jordan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I guess just first speaking on those kind of rate limits, Daniel, are you on a self-hosted environment or a hosted? There is a kind of a default rate limit built into it, which we can always go ahead and update on the self-hosted. You can go ahead and change that as well. So I think in the first place, that would help on the back end without really changing anything or rebuilding anything. Build those scripts as workflows. I would think it'd probably be worthwhile to migrate those legacy scripts over. What I'd recommend though is kind of send us an email so I can have my team look into that a little bit more. I would imagine just updating that rate limit to be higher would help fix that issue without a lot of overhead.
Yeah, on the note of the workflow side of things, I don't it wouldn't necessarily remove the rate limit entirely, but it could make it a little bit more efficient depending on what you're doing to get into it. I would definitely second, reach out to Hudu to make sure that that's being handled correctly and the rate limit can be changed. But one nice thing about Rewst is you don't need that middleware of having ConnectWise Automate run the PowerShell to get the information out. You can have Rewst just directly ask the Graph API for the information. And then if it's not changing, then you can remove having to make a API call to check, does it need to be changed? You can store it as an org variable or something else in Rewst for, what was the last known value. So you can really start to shrink down the amount of calls you make in the first place.
Awesome. So the last question then, and then we're going to keep it going there, was does Rewst have an agent or proxy that can be deployed standalone to send requests or accept accept webhooks? So Rewst has a product that is an open source tool called Agent Smith. We have documentation on it on our documentation portal. You can dive in and take a look at it. It's Azure IoT Hub functionality that might be able to solve that problem, but it's probably a little bit too deep to get onto on this call. So, Aaron, if you want to ping me or Brandon, we could probably direct you in the right way.
Yeah, I just dropped a link to the docs for Agent Smith
Brandon,
in there.
Thank you.
It's pretty sweet. This was made primarily by Tim on the Rock team at Rewst, but it essentially covers all the provisioning you need to self-host a Azure IoT Hub instance in your own Azure partner account, and then it uses that to run the commands back and forth. So if you don't have an RMM you can run commands through, you want to remove that, and you just need something that can run stuff on the endpoint. That's definitely a valid option for you. And it is open source, so if you have any concerns about code security or what's happening, or just want to make an improvement, the GitHub repository is linked on that docs page as well, so you can freely peruse through what the code is. It's all entirely written in Python, I believe.
Thanks, Brandon. Cool. A couple of things lastly was, so next webinar is going to be August 27th at 2 o'clock. I'm going to be meeting with LionGuard. We're going to kind of talk through the MSP, how MSPs can automate security risk response. I actually did a talk today with Joe on stage at the LionGuard WorkCon. So really looking forward to that webinar. It's going to be really fun. Wanted to thank the Hudu team. So thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us. Brandon, big shout out. Thank you for coming on and helping out. Appreciate you guys, and looking forward to our next one. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Nathan, and thanks for coming, Brandon.